Good evening, folks, and welcome to the live stream. Hope you're all very well this evening. So we have some wonderful news. Canada has re-elected its Liberal leader. So Mark Carney will be Prime Minister once again. So that's wonderful news. The Conservative who was running against him has lost his seat as far as I can see. Donald Trump's touch has a wonderful effect on politics, doesn't it? So this could be good news maybe going forward for Reform UK as well. Maybe Nigel Farage can reach out to Donald Trump and ask him to work his magic. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen, at least in the medium and short term. But it's wonderful news for Canada. It means that they have a competent leader in charge. Now, it's going to be difficult going forward for them. There are a lot of challenges. Their biggest neighbour also seems to be their biggest enemy at the moment. So it's going to be difficult for them to deal with Trump, but they have the right guy in charge, because if the Conservative had won, it's likely he would have tried to do some sort of deal with Donald Trump, which would have exploded in his face and damaged the Canadians. But it's wonderful to see how Canadians of all stripes have come together against Donald Trump and rejected his advances towards turning Canada into the 51st state. And it shows that, when people are threatened, they will rally around each other and they will support each other. And it's great to see what Canada responded with. Canada voted Canada first, not Canada 51st. Well said, Chatty Rat, yes. So I think we're going to see a building of the relationship between Canada and the European Union, Canada and Great Britain and the UK going forward, because Donald Trump is not somebody you can deal with. Donald Trump is not somebody who is reliable in any shape or form. Who would they gain support for a majority? I don't know, honestly. Once again, it's going to be difficult for Canada moving forward. Their biggest neighbor, their biggest trading partner is their neighbor. As we know, we do most of our trade with our neighbors. So tactical voting strikes again. Excellent. Hi, Max. Hi, Alistair. Great to see you on the stream tonight. Thanks for that. Yes, it seems a lot of the support that the Liberals received was from the Green Party and I think another moderate party. So not so many Conservatives. A number of conservative voters flipped to the Liberal Party, but it seems to be mostly from moderates and from the left who voted for the Liberals. Which means that they're lending their support to Mark Carney. It's not an endorsement of him. It's more an anti-Trump vote. So it's important that moving forward, if he wants to hold on to those people, he needs to make sure that certain crises within Canada are resolved. For example, housing seems to be one of the biggest ones. Apart from Trump, housing is a major issue that, like in other parts of the world, is creating a lot of problems for governments and for societies. Minority governments are common in Canada. There's been one since 2019. They could rely on the NDP, the New Democratic Party, is that it? With confidence votes, or Elizabeth May. My prediction for the local elections: Labour will get slammed, as they always do. Conservatives will oust Badenoch after the flop in the local election, and Reform won't win as big as the media says. I'm almost 100% agreement with you there, Pineapple. Labour are going to take a bit of a beating, but the thing to remember here is that most of the seats up for grabs are not actually Labour seats, they're Conservative seats. So it's going to look like, I think Reform will do pretty well because the Conservatives are doing really badly. But it will be painted as a massive pushback against the incumbent, but it's not really the Conservatives who are in charge. So the Conservatives are going to suffer probably pretty badly from this because they have a disproportionate number of seats. They won a huge number of council seats back in 2021 because of the Boris bounce, they called it. Boris Johnson was able to lift the party pretty well there. So the Conservatives won a lot of seats that they wouldn't normally win. So a lot of them are up for grabs, and they're likely to go to Reform as opposed to the Labour Party. But people are not happy with the Labour Party, of course, the Labour government, the Bobby Bounce, Mr. Blobby Bounce, Blobby Bounce, I should say. So a lot of seats are going to go to Reform, unfortunately, because they're the protest vote. And people are not going to switch from Conservative to Labour. They're more likely to switch from Conservative to Liberal Democrats, who'll probably do quite well, and Reform, unfortunately. Brad, thank you so much for that super chat. If that power outage in Europe happened in the US, Trump would have had a heart attack caused by not being on air for more than 5 minutes. Yes. Can you imagine? Be like, what the hell am I supposed to do? Well said. Every cloud would have its silver lining in that case, no? Stammer has played a blinder here. A blinder where? The Canadian Party that lost out big, the NDP, are similar to the Labour Party in Great Britain. Okay. So they're like, so the Liberals are a bit like the Liberal Democrats, while the NDP is more like Labour. Because I heard that the NDP, there was a lot of tactical voting where NDP voters switched to Liberal, probably because they were not happy with the Conservatives. So once again, it's about lending support, but it's important that Mark Carney rewards those voters with decent policies. And if it's a coalition government, there's a good chance that it will moderate the Liberals in a sense, so they will hopefully push for good policies. They push good policies. The Greens deserve to be the protest vote. In the locals, I'm going to get to Donald Trump's 100 days, but a response to perhaps the next few months with Donald Trump in a moment. Just want to read more of your comments. In the locals, I think we'll have a massive impact on how Labour move forward. If Reform win, more right-wing Labour, Lib Dems closer to the EU, Labour, and Greens more progressive Labour. I think we could get a mix of all, but I do think you're right there, Francis. If Reform do really well, there'll be this feeling, we have to emulate Reform. We need to copy Reform UK's policies, which would be an absolute disaster. Look at what happened to the Conservatives when they tried to out Farage. It doesn't work. So guys, I want to move on to this clip here. This is Pulitzer Prize winning writer who was interviewed by Channel 4 about, what Donald Trump is all about.
This is really the key question that we're all trying to answer after 3 turbulent months. Is Trump an aberration, or is he part of a pattern?
It would be very hard to find an example of a president of the United States before Trump who behaved in this way, had the ambitions and policies that he has. But I would say that in many ways, if you look at the state and local levels, if you look at people who serve in Congress and their own sensibilities, there is a long history of what I call illiberalism, which is not just one thing, it's a variety of ideas and sensibilities and relationships that have changed over time, but kind of feed off a set of perspectives on the world.
We all love looking at American history, and when we do, we tend to look at great figures like, Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln and, of course, George Washington. One president that rarely crops up in conversation in Europe is a guy called Andrew Jackson. But Andrew Jackson is someone that Trump, even in his first term, admired greatly. And I'm assuming that his portrait is hanging up in the newly readorned and golden leafed old Oval Office. Tell us about Andrew Jackson and why he might be so important to Donald Trump.
Right. Well, Andrew Jackson is a symbol of a powerful leader. He has been identified as a sort of symbol of the common man, so to speak, of democratization in American life and politics. But it's also important to recognize that, the 1830s in particular was a time of mass expulsions that he was in part responsible for. Most vividly and horrifically was the expulsion of thousands of native people from their homelands east of the Mississippi to a vague place called Indian Territory out in the Trans-Mississippi West.
Okay, so Donald Trump wants to emulate Andrew Jackson by just kicking people out. Well, he seems to be off to a good start with that, doesn't he?
But it was a time when Catholics and Black people and Mormons, and Masons were being expelled from various areas of American life. So it's a way of recognizing, as Abraham Lincoln at the time and even Tocqueville in Democracy America recognized, that, American democracy and illiberal expulsions are interconnected. They're not separate or parallel tracks. And so that to that extent, you could make, I think, a very strong argument that what emerges in the 1820s and 1830s in the Jacksonian period is what you could call really an illiberal democracy.
And of course, Andrew Jackson famously had a fight with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, I believe, it ruled against him, and he more or less said, bring it on. What are you going to do about it?
That's right. One of the decisions in particular was not to Jackson's liking, and he said, okay, let him enforce it. And in a sense, the resonance today is a reminder that, the rule of law in the United States depends on respecting the findings of courts of law. The courts themselves do not have direct enforcement power. So it's really, in a sense, the courts and the legislature come up with policies, but it's in the executive branch to really enforce them. And if the executive refuses to do so and Congress just goes along with it, there's really nothing the courts could do.
And that's what we're seeing with Donald Trump at the moment, where Donald Trump is refusing to implement measures refusing to listen to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court voted recently 9-0, instructing him to follow the guidance or the diktat of a lower court. And that court had requested for Donald Trump to reach out to El Salvador to return Garcia, who had been deported to El Salvador without due process. And I said he needed to be returned. You need to facilitate his return. And the Trump administration's response was, first, we don't have to do that. And second, that no, we actually won the case. We won 9-0. When it obviously was completely false. They had lost the case 9-0. Even conservatives, people that Donald Trump in the previous administration had put into the Supreme Court, voted against the government, said the government, the Trump administration need to return or facilitate the return of this guy. So Donald Trump seems to be copying and pasting Andrew Jackson here.
Unless people get sufficiently upset about it so that it has true political consequences. But I think that one of the reasons he really admires Jackson is not only because he was, a strong leader, but also because he decided he would go his own way, regardless of what the courts and other institutions decided. So Donald Trump is hardly the first person to try to wield or expand the power of the executive branch. And certainly until Trump, people in the Republican Party and on the right in general were very critical of the concentration of power in the federal government and, seemed to be vocal supporters of what is called state rights or local control. Now,
what hypocrites the Republicans are. So when they're out of power, it's like, no, we need to extend more powers to the states. When they are in power, we need to concentrate power around the executive. Where do we go from here? What is the consequence of this? What will be the next stage? Because Donald Trump is already putting out merchandise for Trump 2028. Now, I've hinted at maybe it's not actually Donald Trump 2028. Maybe it's his son or his grandson, or maybe it's him himself. It's against the rules, but there are no rules anymore. Donald Trump doesn't follow the rules. He's above the law. He's literally above the law. So how are you supposed to remove him apart from a coup? But he's already surrounded himself with sycophants in the military. So he's replaced some of the top brass with sycophants to protect himself from a coup, probably. Although coups don't generally start from the top, but it's difficult to organize one without senior generals on board.
It seems to flip, so that they're very strong supporters of Donald Trump's amassing in many ways, unprecedented power. He's testing the limits of what
Sure.
might be acceptable, and I think he's a provocateur because he's hoping to have a real confrontation, which might allow him to declare a national emergency and then rule, truly as a autocrat.
So he wants a national emergency. So that's the goal here. Put in place sycophants who will not question my authority, and then in order to continue to rule as an autocrat, well, what I'll do is I'll create an emergency, start a war with someone, or create some certain internal problems. I think there's a real, and he goes on to say, I'm not going to show the whole video, but he goes on to say how there's a chance that the protests that are taking place at the moment, if they become significant, Trump will see this as a threat to his power. And then he will impose martial law, or he'll use the Sedition Act or something like this to clamp down on human rights. Look at countries like Hungary. Look at countries like Turkey. Look at Russia, for example. So Trump wants to emulate these guys. Strong men who have complete control over the judiciary, control over the media. And if you look at some of the interviews that are taking place in regards to the White House, a lot of the people doing the asking the questions are bloggers, are YouTubers, but they're not on the left, they're on the right, the far right, fascists who are invited to the White House to ask questions, and the questions are all stuff like, "Wow, Donald Trump, you are so wonderful. How do you be so wonderful all the time?" This sort of rubbish, not holding the government to account. The media is supposed to hold these people to account, and obviously they're not. I'm really worried about the consequences of this for the rest of the world. That Canada has said no to Donald Trump. Nigel Farage wants to copy and paste Donald Trump's policies. There are countries in Europe who want to copy and paste Donald Trump's policies and Donald Trump's approach to things. There are measures to protect citizens, like the European Convention on Human Rights. Isn't it interesting that there were, Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch were talking about, we need to get out of the European Convention on Human Rights. We just have our own British Bill of Rights. Would you trust Robert Jenrick with protecting your human rights? I don't think so. You'd be insane to do that. Would you trust Nigel Farage with your human rights? No. You need to have something above that. They kept saying we need to emulate the US. Well, Donald Trump is not respecting the Constitution. It's ironic that he says we in Europe need to emulate American values when it comes to freedom of expression. But they're literally putting people in prison for being critical of Donald Trump and being critical of Israel. Anyway, guys, let's move on. Kemi Badenoch, talk of removing. Let me just check. You can see that. Talk of removing Badenoch. Worst possible thing for Tory fortunes, Hunt says. So, Sir Jeremy Hunt, we turned to the local election on Thursday, in which the Tories are expected to perform very poorly once again. But he tells Sophie Rage that he has full sympathy for Kemi Badenoch, saying she has an impossible job. The electorate are still not willing to give us the hearing because we were in power for 14 years and they decided they wanted to change, he says. It'd be the worst possible thing to have any kind of speculation about a change in leadership. So one of you had mentioned in the chat about, well, maybe Kemi Badenoch will be replaced. I don't think so. Potentially happy with Robert Jenrick taking over, I don't see her going. It all depends on how bad the Tories do. Now, they will do really badly because, as was said at the beginning, there are a lot of seats up for grabs. So the Tories are going to lose a lot of seats because they won a significant number in 2021 because of, as was said before, the Boris bounce. So it's going to be a bit of a bloodbath for the Tories, and they're going to lose either to the Liberal Democrats or they're going to lose to Reform. And if they lose significantly to Reform, then I think there's going to be a lot of... See, if they lose a lot of seats to the Liberal Democrats, Kemi Badenoch will be in a better position. If they lose significant seats to Reform, I think there's going to be pressure on her to change tack or on her to go. But the problem is that if she does go, you're going to have a leadership contest. It's going to be an embarrassment once again. And you're going to end up with Robert Jenrick, who's not very well liked. I actually think he's a very good speaker. Okay, I'll give him that. His policies are terrible. He's like a sort of cheap version of Nigel Farage. He doesn't have the charisma of Nigel Farage. He's good at speaking. That's all he has, really. But that's it. And he's not all that well liked within the Conservative Party. So he's going to have a bit of an uphill struggle convincing people to support him, I think. Lively chat tonight. Yes, indeed. The Tories have no one to replace her. In reality, Jenrick is just as bad. Yes, he's terrible. But she's set the bar pretty low. So whoever does, and who wants to take over this job, once again, is a sort of placeholder for the next number of years. Cowboy. This is not a cowboy hat. It's a tricorn hat from the 1700s. Good at talking rubbish. Yes, she's good. Well, both of them, I think, are. Do you think Age Cleverly could have a shot against Jenrick? No, because once again, if it's likely that the Conservatives will lose to Reform, so the Conservatives will be like, oh, we need to be more like Nigel Farage. We need to be more like Reform. And a laser musket. It's yes. What's it? But they want to be more like Reform. So I don't think James Cleverly would have a chance really there. They'd want somebody further to the right. And Kemi Badenoch is pretty much to the right, but you can see there are some areas where she's not completely off, headbanger. She's not a complete headbanger, but she is much further to the right than the average person within the Conservative Party. Although, is there anyone left in the Conservative Party who we could describe as a moderate? Apologies for the off-topic question, but what's your thoughts on the mass protests in Dublin last Saturday? Will you do a video? I should do a video on it. So there were some protests in Dublin about immigration, but also there were counter protests, I believe. So I will look into that and see about doing a video on it. I will certainly look into it. What way do you see Labour going, left or right? It depends once again on the results this week, not even next week. If Reform do really well, I have a fear that the Labour Party will move to the right. We've already seen signs of them talking about immigration in a negative way and how the numbers have to come down and all of this sort of thing. So, yeah, I think they're already heading in that direction as well, which is a bit sad because they're supposed to be a progressive party. And I have a video dropping tomorrow where a Labour MP is responding. He clashes with a member of Reform UK on immigration, and he misses a huge number of opportunities to respond with facts, but he doesn't do that. He just doubles down on, oh yeah, okay, yeah, they're here illegally and stuff like that when it comes to asylum seekers. James Whale, wow, that man has gone completely downhill. Yeah, he is a bit strange, that guy. Anyway, guys, let's move on. Reform. And then we'll take a break.
Let's check in with YouGov's Director of Political Analytics, I do apologise, Analytics, Patrick English. Patrick, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. No worries. My fault for having such a hard to pronounce job title.
Well, I don't know. It's a great title. I just wish I could say it.
It's pretty good.
So this reform lead, it's not a flash in the pan, is it? It's looking really, really solid. What's behind it, do you think?
Yes, you're quite right. This is a pattern now rather than just simply a one-off poll. We have reform ahead of Labour by 3 points. It's not a big gap. It's not a large gap. It is what we would call the traditional margin of error associated with polling of around about 3 points plus or minus for any.
Okay, before we continue, I think it's very important for people to remember the difference between a poll lead and a number of seats. Because remember, back in 2019, the Conservatives won a very small number of votes. Like their percentage of the vote actually was pretty low, but they won a significant majority in the House of Commons. And Labour at the last election won was it like 34% of the vote, but they ended up with a massive majority. So it's about concentrating votes. It's not about actual percentage leads. And the problem for Reform is that they're second place in a significant number of seats. So they're hoping that the leader, be it the Conservatives or Labour, will fall by the wayside, and then they will take over. It's not that people will be coming out and supporting Reform with enthusiasm. It's more they're not happy with the incumbent. And if how can I say, national poll that puts Reform ahead doesn't really mean a lot. You have to look at individual seats, and there aren't that many seats I can see where Reform are doing much better than. And remember, they Reform tend to underperform when it comes to the polls. So the poll presents or it comes to the election, I should say. So the poll presents them as doing really well, but then when the votes come in, they don't actually do all that well. And I think that's down to enthusiasm. People, when they're interviewed for the polls during the polling period, they say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to vote for Reform," and then they just can't be bothered after. They don't turn up. So that's it. I think that's a significant problem. That maybe they've worked on that. Maybe they've brought down that, not eliminated, but reduced that problem somewhat. But it is still a problem for Reform, where people will tell the pollster one thing and then just not bother to vote on the day.
Party on any given metric. But it certainly is the case that Reform are consistently up there, consistently at least tied with Labour, beating the Conservatives. And I think what's behind it, perhaps, is a growing frustration with the main two parties, the current, let's say, main two parties in British politics, Labour and the Conservatives, among the British public. Let's not forget, in 2024, that the public swept aside the Conservatives in a landslide majority for Labour. But that election was so much about removing the Conservatives and putting...
Sorry, I was reading the comments of before. Let me read Sir Larry's comment, and then I'll read Freckled Bunny. Deformed and Granny Whittlebottom, sorry, and her dancing dentures. Oh my goodness. Okay. Tackling Farage by being like Farage is like resorting to fighting fire with fire without attempting to use water first. Yes. Yeah, this idea, okay, what we need to do is we need to be more like Farage, and that will convince people to vote for us. No, it doesn't work. The Conservatives tried it with UKIP, didn't really work out for them. They tried it with the Brexit Party, didn't really work out. They tried it, of course, with Reform UK. Let's try and steal Reform UK's policies. Look, when it comes to immigration, it's not that you abandon the field and leave it to Farage. You need to approach it in a way that convinces people to vote for you. You have to say, okay, we're dealing with this in a humane way. We're dealing with it in an articulate way. And this is why I'm so critical of Labour MP. Thanks so much, Freckle Punny. And I'm so critical of Labour when they don't push back on things like the quote unquote illegal migrants or 5-star hotels. Like, the problem here is that the public are convinced that the people crossing the channel in small boats are illegal migrants. They're not. They're asylum seekers. And there's a big difference there. Undocumented migrants is the proper term. And then when it comes to the so-called 5-star hotels, they're not hotels. When people are moved in, what happens is the government and the Home Office issue a contract, maybe to a subcontractor or to a contractor. They say, okay, we need to accommodate 100 people. Then they look for a hotel and they say to the hotel, here's a contract. Now it's changed from a hotel. It's no longer a hotel. It's just basic accommodation. But why? Labour need to push back on this. They need to inform the public. These are not hotels. Now they're talking about moving people into rented accommodation. Now, economically, that makes sense because the hotels are more expensive. But Farage and Reform have jumped on look, these people are going to be located in your area. Now, I don't know why Serco released this information this week. Was it the government that was pushing Serco to release this information? I don't know. But it's creating obstacles, and the government need to, because if they allow this issue to fester, the only people who benefit from it is Reform. Brad, thanks so much for that super chat. Reform being the answer to working class plight is like saying Boris Johnson knows the best content supplier is. That's a good analogy, yes. But like putting Boris Johnson in charge of birth control. Putting Nigel Farage in charge of, I don't know, the NHS is like putting Boris Johnson in charge of birth control. I'm voting for the Sausage Roll Party. A good choice. Sponsored by Greggs. Anyway, back to this.
In a new government rather than it was actually anything about Labour. And what they've seen from Labour, they haven't really been impressed with. And it's not surprising, I think, that now we're seeing Reform UK coming through the middle.
But we have to be clear, these elections this week are happening in a particular part of the country, a Tory-dominated part of England, yeah?
Yes, exactly. And this is national vote intention. This isn't a projection of how we think local elections will go, and it's not even indeed readable across to what the BBC will produce in the projected national share of the local election results. So we have to keep in mind that the results that we see on Thursday will be, as you say, from very much Conservative areas. We will see heavy Conservative losses. We think we will see Reform gains. We won't see Labour really doing all that much, but that's the nature of the contest that we're seeing. Labour only have about a quarter of the seats that they're defending compared to the Conservatives.
Right, but it could be interpreted as a terrible day for Kemi Badenoch.
It certainly could be, and for all intents and purposes, it looks like it will be. They are the party of opposition. What parties of opposition are supposed to do in opposition is beat the parties of government in midterm cycle elections. But that
and I think this is going to feed into this narrative that Nigel Farage and Reform are the de facto opposition, and I think Farage is going to run with this. He'll be like, "Oh, look, the Conservatives were supposed to win all these seats because they're the official opposition. Nobody likes the Labour government, so we should have. So the Conservatives should have won all these seats, but we won them." This would be his narrative, and he will say, "See, we are the real opposition." They don't care about the reality, but this is going to be a disaster. I actually heard Kemi Badenoch today, and she was saying stuff like, "These are seats we shouldn't have won." It's like, no, you're not supposed to say that. These are seats we shouldn't have won. Every seat is the one that you're supposed to win. You know, in reality, yes, we know that, but you don't say that. Who are her political strategists? Who is actually advising her on what to say? It's like at PMQs. She has, okay, here is my script. It was prepared yesterday, and this is what I'm going to read out. I'm not going to be. I hate PMQs. You guys know I hate PMQs, but you need to be able to dance. That type of tango. If you can't, then you shouldn't be there. Magic 8 Ball made Jacob Rees-Mogg. Either way, Badenoch is finished. I expect her to stand down within days of the election. You could be right, but once again, it depends on how badly. I think there are different grades. So if a lot of the votes go to the Liberal Democrats, she'll be okay. If a small number go to reform, she'll be okay. If a medium number go to reform, I think there'll be a lot of pressure on her, but she'll probably stay. But if it's a complete wipeout, you're going to hear a lot of banging going on about how she needs to go. It's a disaster. She needs to leave. They need to have a new leader. She's been you'll see this. The people who were until yesterday going, she's a wonderful leader, she knows what she's doing, will be like, yeah, she has to go. They'll, from nothing, they will be like, oh yeah, she has to go. The real opposition party to Labour have only 5 seats. And it isn't even a real party, but a company. Yes, well said. What would Nigel Farage do as Prime Minister? Oh my goodness. That's an interesting question. What would Nigel Farage do as Prime Minister? So he would, of course, push forward policies like removing protections for the environment. It's like, I think he would be a bit like Trump. He would put Lee Anderson in charge of the Home Office or something like that. Richard Tice would be Chancellor. We can't really go into too much other because they don't have that many MPs. But it would be like a Trump administration. They would have to have a massive majority if they want, and it would collapse within a few. It would probably fall apart within a few months due to infighting and. It's fascists are not very well organized. They're always at each other's throats, and they're always jockeying for power. So I don't see it going too well. Leaving the ECHR is amongst the biggest concerns about the Farage government, but I don't see that happening, honestly. I'm not being naive here. I don't see it happening because the consequences for the UK would be too strong. The US have said you don't tamper with the Good Friday Agreement, and the ECHR is a cornerstone of the Good Friday Agreement. This is irrespective of who's in the White House. The Republican Party and the Democrats have said, you need to respect the Good Friday Agreement. And the European Union have said as well, like if you're not going to respect the Good Friday Agreement, there will be economic sanctions on the UK. Farage could, I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying it would turn the UK into a sort of pariah state, be like North Korea. Something Brexiteers would like to see, of course. Badenoch's political advisor is Lloyd Christmas. Maybe even Lloyd Christmas would be doing a better job than whoever it is at the moment. Thanks so much, Class Action. Dumb and Dumber. Guys, we're a bit over the time, but let's take a short comedy moment, and we'll be back in just a jiffy with more serious stuff. Hope you enjoy this. Hopefully the audio is not too loud on this. Normally is a little bit loud.
Ireland is getting a Wendy's. Thank you very much, America, for bestowing upon my people more of your delicious obesity. As you can see, I'm doing quite a bit of it myself. I'm very excited because I always see Americans on the television say, I'm gonna go and get a Wendy's. And I'm like, ooh, processed food I haven't had. Is it fucked up that I used a southern accent there? Is that racist? I'm talking about other white people, so I think it's fine. I promise I don't think all southern people eat is burgers. I think all they eat is barbecue. It's the media's fault, don't blame me. It says they sell croissants and biscuits, but none of these things are croissants or biscuits. They're all just burger. This is a croissant, and this is a fucking biscuit. Europe invented this shit, America. You can't just go calling things whatever the fuck you want. These are all clearly burgers. You can't just give it a different name and pretend you're not eating a burger. Anyway, thank you for your culture, America, and follow me. I'm delicious.
Anyway, let's move on. Okay, this is a story that's causing a bit of trouble at the moment. Kneecap's apology is half-hearted, but a lineup should be up to the organizer. So the Prime Minister wouldn't go and watch the Irish hip-hop trio Kneecap, a spokesperson for Number 10 has said. So Keir Starmer's spokesperson said that the Prime Minister utterly rejects the views expressed by the band, and they described it as completely unacceptable. They said Starmer rejects them in the strongest terms. The band is in hot water for comments made which appear to endorse Hamas and encourage people to kill their local MP. The group strenuously deny both those claims and has apologized. So So Kneecap, if you're not familiar with Kneecap, is an Irish band, or not band, it's like a rap group. And they're, how can I say, controversial. They have come out and made some pretty strong statements about... See, this is the thing. They're not a political group. They're not a political party. As Urban Legend says, they're artists. So if John Lennon had come out and said something like this, would people be saying John Lennon needs to be condemned? Now, I understand. So some people are saying this is incitement. Others are saying it's artistic, it's freedom of expression. They have apologized. So if they've apologized, I think they realize, okay, we've gone too far. But I find it interesting how the same people who are demanding apologies or condemning Kneecap. For example, the Conservatives didn't have a problem with Frank Hester. Do you know Frank Hester? Frank Hester is a multimillionaire who donates to the Conservative Party. What's funny about Frank Hester, and this is a political party, so this is not like, just some guy. He's donating to a political party to ensure that they get into power. He said that he would like to... What was it he said about Diane Abbott? She should be shot. Okay, so remember that. So he was talking about a member of Parliament he said about black women, they discussed him or something like that. Now, the Conservatives didn't return his money. They didn't say he shouldn't have said these things. They started talking about, this is just Frank Hester, he just... I don't agree. I think it's regrettable. What he said was regrettable. That's the sort of non-apology or non-criticism. And then what happened? Frank Hester gave more money to the Conservative Party. So when Frank Hester says things, it's okay. But when Kneecap says things, no, it needs to be condemned and they need to be thrown in jail. Because they support Palestine. Yeah, they came out recently and they put up a big sign during a festival. Was it a festival in America? And they said F Israel. So that didn't go down too well. The Trump administration blew a gasket over it. Imagine John Lennon being controversial. Yes. A vote for Farage is a vote for Trump. F Hester. Oh dear. Fester, yes. Uncle Hester. Wendy's is a Pippi Longstrauss of Dixieland Obervars. Okay. Didn't ban Boy when he said he was afraid of America. So, Kneecap bad, but let's give Trump a state visit. Yes. Has Kneecap actually committed any crimes? I don't know. Donald Trump has committed many felons, but he will be... So, there is no consistency here. I understand Starmer is trying to, be the prime minister and he doesn't want to get involved in this. He certainly doesn't want to be seen on the side of Kneecap. But it raises a number of issues. It raises the idea of free speech, should they be allowed to say these things? Is this incitement? Is it just artistic expression? When members of the Loyal Orange Order, when they play their songs, is this a freedom of expression? When the songs talk about blood red shores and, when some of the language that you hear at some of their events is, would be regarded as sectarian or maybe threatening or incitement. So I haven't seen the movie, so I must check out the movie. They have a movie. Kneecap has a movie. So this is serious. I think Kneecap seem to consider it serious enough to apologize. So they have decided, look, this has gone too far and we need to apologize. But I don't know much about them, so it wouldn't be. I'm somewhat stuck between, on the one hand you have, see, they're not a political organization, so they're not saying you need to go out and vote for this party. They haven't. I don't think they've advocated for voting for any party. So there is there is a sort of grey area, because if you say, well, then they should be condemned, then there's a whole list of other organisations in Ireland or in Northern Ireland or in different parts of the UK you'd have to throw into that mix as well, because they have said similar things. They're not all groups or rap bands or whatever, but they are organisations. Some of them receive charity money as well. So in that case, would Public Enemy have been ruled out in the night? Probably, yes. I think the point of saying about MPs probably was a step too far for them. But we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, I want to move on to another story here. Brexit. So this is June Mummery, who blocked me on social media because I called her out before. So she's here complaining about fish.
Are you worried that once again the fishermen of the United Kingdom are going to be abandoned?
Abandoned by whom? Who abandoned the fishing communities back in, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019? Who was in charge for all that period? Oh, yes, Jacob Rees-Mogg's party.
Yes, I'm very worried. Be abandoned. They've been abandoned. They are abandoned. This country has abandoned them for over 40 years. Yes, I'm extremely worried. It's a national scandal, Jacob.
And after
the impotent rage here.
Fishing communities voted strongly for Brexit, didn't they? Because they thought that they would get our own fishing waters back. Mm-hmm. And that hasn't happened, but it was meant to happen in 2026. And it looks as if...
Yes, but even if you got the fishing waters back, where do you sell the fish? Okay. Because, see, this is something that people don't understand or don't know about Brexit. The problem with Brexit when it came to fish is that most of the fish caught in British waters are not consumed in Britain. British people don't like the type of fish caught in British waters. They prefer fish that's caught outside British waters. And the fish that are caught in British waters are generally sold into the single market, into the EU. So when people like June Mummery started complaining about, we're not able to access our waters and stuff like this, even if you could access all the waters, so the Tory government came to an agreement with the European Union in order to allow greater access to fish. Now, these are also the same people who supported the idea of selling off fishing fleets. Back in the 1980s, the fishermen decided, we can actually make a lot of money if we just sell our boats, sell our fleets to European fishing companies and fishermen. They decided we're going to do that, and now they're complaining that they don't have a fishing fleet.
If Labour's going to give that away again for a defence pact when we contribute more to European defence than any other EU nation.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it is a national scandal. Let's just be mindful that France, 35,000 tonne of the fish that arrives in Boulogne each year, 2/3 of that comes from British waters.
Okay, yes, and it's sold into the single market.
France has 93% of the quota for cod in the English Channel. In the Celtic Sea, France gets nearly 3 times the British allocation of Dover sole, roughly 4 times more cod and 5 times more haddock. We wear the crown and we're throwing the emeralds and the diamonds over to the EU again. 2026, we were promised that we would take back full control of our waters and rebuild our deprived, I say deprived, seaside towns.
Why didn't you do that? You told people to vote for Brexit. And now you're complaining about the consequences of Brexit. Oh my goodness. Jacob Rees-Mogg likes fishing kids for his workhouses. Thanks, Brad. Yes. The French buy the quota. Yes. Oh my goodness. Who is this crazy woman? So this is the woman with the very strange eyebrows. No, I shouldn't be complaining about very strange eyebrows. Where are we gone? We'll bring her back. She was the head of an organization called, I don't remember the name, it was a fishing organization, but she convinced people in the fishing communities to vote for Brexit. Now, she told them, no, once we leave the European Union, everything will be wonderful. We'll be able to fish to our heart's content and we'll still be able to sell our fish into the single market. Nothing will change. Everything will be wonderful. It'll be terrible for the EU, it'll be wonderful for us. And then she didn't realize, either she didn't know this, or she was lying. And I'm more of the idea that she was lying because she's constantly been told the problem here. There's feck all cod in the English Channel. Cod is a cold water fish. Yes. When she said cod in the English Channel, I was like, but isn't cod not like fish that you catch in the North Sea? She's lying, yes. So she knew she was selling the fishing community a lie, but she just doubled down because it's been explained to her so many times. You can catch all the fish you want, but if you're selling it into a market that is closed to you or has restrictions, then that's a problem. But she will never admit that she was wrong. Another minister for common sense. Yeah, something like that. I have 100 laptops in my warehouse, but I can only reasonably sell 500 to actual customers. I have 500 laptops too many. Oh my goodness. Okay, guys, we're almost at the end of the stream, so I want to just cover one or two stories here before we go. Move on to Donald Trump. This is a good story, though.
This is President Trump's job approval rating on taxes. 38% approve, 53% disapprove. This is Fox News polling. 38% on the economy approve, 56% disapprove, 33% on inflation. We know this was huge in the election, 59% disapprove. But Scott Bessent had a very important message as the 100-day mark approaches on all of that. Listen.
Okay, let's go back to those figures for a moment. So before we get there, Donald Trump's job approval. So on taxes, 38% think Donald Trump is doing a good job. Okay. On the economy, 38%, and on inflation, 33% think that Donald Trump is doing a good job. Now, you may think, why the hell isn't it lower? Like, who actually believes Donald Trump is doing a good job? It's the MAGA. The MAGA are the sycophants, the people with the red hats. They are the ones who, if Donald Trump, ate a baby live on TV, they would celebrate it. Okay, so there's nothing that Donald Trump could do that would upset the MAGA. Okay, so they will always vote for Trump no matter. If Donald Trump said, I'm going to actually put my son in charge, you're going to vote for him, they will go, yes, sir, we will vote for your son. They don't have functioning brains. They just do as they're told. So those people will always support Trump. And they're about 20 or 30% of the electorate. So in reality, this is like 3%.
Bessent had a very important message as the 100-day mark approaches on all of that. Listen from this morning.
We've got a three-legged stool here. It's trade, it's tax, it's deregulation. President Trump has come out of the blocks roaring. And I think this is something new for the
roaring, all right, yes.
American people. We're going to continue to make the U.S. the best destination for capital in the world.
And that something new might be the short-term pain people are feeling reflected in the polls. But will they hang in there, Robert, to see what is promised as long-term gain?
Yeah, let me be quick here. I mean, one, Steve knows a tariff is a tax on the consumer. Yes, it brings revenues, but it's not a tax cut to the consumer. So that's just not true. And Steve's actually written about that, as has Kevin Hassett.
So the Treasury Secretary and other people within the Trump administration, they're not stupid people. Trump is stupid, and certain people are really stupid. But the senior people are just lying. They realize, okay, here's an opportunity for me to do well, to enrich myself or to have a cushy job. All I have to do is just regurgitate Donald Trump's lies. I don't actually have to think. I just have to tell people up is down and down is up, and it will work.
Respect to the three-legged stool, I think with short-term pain, you're seeing it in the polls. People don't know really what's going on. Things are actually, some prices are going up, some are going down. This is not actually the immediate, great economy that the president spoke about. Actually.
My only fear about this is will a sort of boiled frog approach, the way the analogy of the boiled frog, that people are staying in the hot water and they don't realize it's so hot. Are we going to see something like this with the Trump administration, that people will just get used to the damage, and then the approval rating will eventually sort of level off, and then people will be like, well, there's nothing we can do about it. Or will it eventually go back up again? Like, we've never really seen an approval rating go up without, some sort of major intervention like a war or something like that. So Donald Trump still has time to start a war. Iran is probably on the horizon. But is it possible for his approval numbers to go up on their own? Will people just get used to the damage? Probably not, because the pain has just begun. There's a lot of pain still to come, because the tariffs have just been imposed, but the impact of the tariffs is going to take weeks and months. So people will start to see shortages. People will start to see very high prices, because the tariff has two impacts. It increases the price of the import, but it also reduces availability, because as we saw, some companies will not be able to afford to pay the tariff. So they won't import the goods. And if they don't import the goods, they won't sell them. So you'll start to see less availability. It's like Brexit. People were complaining right after Brexit how, hey, we're not able to get fresh fruit and vegetables. We used to be able to get fresh fruit and vegetables. Now they go bad after a few days. They used to last a week because the availability is less. Or people, remember the supermarket shelves, putting up, moving stuff around on the supermarket shelf to make it look fuller. That was, a way for supermarkets to remain open, because supermarkets don't want to create a sort of panic. They don't want to convince people that there isn't stuff available. It's underhanded, it's dishonest. But if you move stuff around, it creates the impression that the shelves are full when they're pretty much empty. Because supermarkets don't want people to go in and go, hey, there's nothing here, I'll go to a different supermarket, or there seems to be a shortage of stuff here, I'm not going to come back here. So they definitely don't want that. And you're going to see that going forward, because obviously you pay the tariff and jack up the price, or you avoid importing the goods, and you're going to start to see shortages. And I don't know how much Americans can take. Because during the pandemic, people, understood, okay, there's a shortage. We understand there's a shortage, and it's going to last a period of time. Some people went out and stocked up on toilet paper for some reason. But generally, we had an understanding, okay, there's a pandemic on. We need to be careful with what we buy, and we need to be, we understand that we're going through a difficult time. But with Donald Trump's tariffs, the problem is he's imposing them and then removing them and then putting them back in place and then removing them. And then it's creating a massive amount of uncertainty. So businesses don't... What was it? Land Rover or Jaguar were saying we're not going to ship to the US because we don't know if there's going to be a tariff. Target have already said they have 3 weeks before they start running short on stuff. Yeah, the end of May is going to be an interesting time. JLR, thanks, Frederick. Oh yes, I wanted to show you this clip before we go, because we still have enough. No, I'll leave that one to the end. I want to show you this clip, which was really interesting. Maybe you've already seen the interview, but this is Gary Stevenson.
I think most people still do not understand or accept or believe that the reason they're getting poorer and poorer is because of growing inequality and the growing wealth of the rich, and especially the super rich. I think most people haven't made that connection.
They know they're getting poorer because of inequality. I don't think they have yet realised the super rich are getting richer because of the inequality.
Yeah, they don't connect these things. What you've seen in the last 5 years, this massive increase in government debt, this massive increase in poverty, coupled with this enormous increase in wealth of the super rich. And people don't really connect them. And you can't blame them, because things like I've mentioned here, like the fact that stock markets are at all-time highs, there's been massive increases in wealth of the rich. That doesn't really get reported that much in the newspapers. And also your average person doesn't know any of the super rich, right? So you don't see their wealth exploding. There's a lack of visibility on it. But I think two things. If people understood, one, the rich are getting much richer, and that's the cause of their growing poverty. And two, if this is left untreated, it will grow and get worse. they would demand change. So really, you only really need the public to understand those two things. And that is why I go back to, that is why Elon Musk and Donald Trump are spending so much money to point their finger at foreigners, because the foreigners stand between you and understanding that.
Well said. I've been saying this for so long. You know, the rich will invest money in convincing poor people that their greatest enemy is somebody who has even less than them. They will spend huge amounts of money. Look at Talk TV, look at GB News, Talk TV in particular. Keep pushing the line of, you know, the problem is immigrants, the problem is people on benefits. They are the enemy, they are the problem. Never look up. Never look at who's funding these organizations. Never look at how much the super rich actually pay in taxes, how much they earn and how much they pay in taxes, how much their wealth has increased over the last number of years. Don't look at those people. No, you're supposed to be angry. Don't be angry with them. Be angry with the people who have nothing, especially angry with people who have less than you, but we are going to convince you that they're getting more than you, because that makes you really angry. You see all this grievance thing, like, oh, look at people on benefits. They're all living off the benefit. They're benefiting from the system. They're sponging off the state. They have like access to luxury cars. They have a free house. They're lazy. They don't want to work. You know, they're all gaming the system. This sort of thing. And if you're middle class or if you're working class and you hear this and you don't know, you're like, hey, why am I working and these people are doing nothing? Why am I compensating for that? I need to be angry with those people. That's what they want to achieve. They don't want you to be angry with the multimillionaires and billionaires who are able to move their money around, who are able to benefit from tax loopholes, who are able to afford very expensive accountants and lawyers to help them avoid contributing. I said before, there are two things that rich people hate. It's paying taxes and seeing those taxes to help the most vulnerable in society. And they will pay lots of money to convince people that the greatest outcome is for rich people to get even richer. And in order to achieve that, you need to convince people to look down, to be angry with people who have something less than them. Angry with people on benefits, angry with asylum seekers. Asylum seekers, in many cases, who arrive with just the clothes on their back. They don't have anything. They're not even allowed to work in order to accumulate anything. You're supposed to be angry with those people. You know, are there some bad eggs within that group? Of course there are. There are bad eggs everywhere. Very bad eggs in every aspect of society. But what the media will do is focus on the worst elements within the asylum, group of asylum seekers. Like, if every asylum seeker was terrible, can you imagine the situation? No, what they do is they focus on some terrible people and say, well, these are all asylum seekers. And you have to be angry with them. As an old age pensioner, I'm now a sponger. Well, I will make it not. I was going to make an exception in your case, Chad. No, I'm joking. But yeah, people will describe, the right-wing press don't focus too much on pensioners, because most of the pensioners are watching their shows. But there is this sort of thing, you've worked all your life, then you deserve to receive your pension. But these foreigners coming in, they don't deserve anything. They're living off the state. They're not allowed to work. But you're being convinced by the rich that you should be angry not with the rich, but with the poor. And it's been working very well over the last number of decades. So guys, I want to cover one final thing because we have the local elections on Thursday, I think it is. And I want to show you this clip. This has been doing the rounds.
Here with Karen Shores, the Labour candidate in the by-election.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
No chance of me giving you my vote. Now, if it was Zara Sultana, happily. But I can't stand the man, wouldn't vote for the man. I'm going green. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Okay, that didn't work out too well, did it? So people are not happy with Keir Starmer, so they're going to... Zara Sultana, who's a left-wing ex-Labour MP, she's now an independent, or the Green Party, so I'll vote for the Green Party or someone within the left of the Labour Party, but I won't vote for for Starmer, although Starmer's not running, so it's just a caveat to add there. But yeah, people are not happy with the government. They're not happy with these policies. I never understood what the goal of these policies were. The changes to the winter fuel allowance, you're saving like £1 billion, and then of course many people are going to claim the benefit, so you're actually going to lose any saving. And then the two-child benefit cap, what was the point of that? So were these good policies? No, they've come back to bite the government on the arse. We expected Labour, we got Tories. Trump is getting dumber by the day. He started off from a very low place. I watched a documentary on the Beeb about the riot outside the hotel housing asylum seekers in Kirby. Some of the views were pretty scary. The role of social media was the main issue. Yes, and in the past, if you wanted to organize something like that, you'd need to have some grassroots organization or some sort of group that had to exist for a long time. Now with social media, you just jump on a Facebook group and say, hey, we're going down to this asylum center at 6 p.m. this afternoon. Anyone want to join in? And you get 100 people, and then make sure to share it with other people on Facebook. And then hundreds of thousands of people would turn up. And social media is part of the problem here. Political X, great to see you on the stream tonight, just as I'm finishing. So guys, I want to say thank you so much to everyone who came on tonight. Thank you so much for your super chats. Thanks so much for the support you sent to the channel as well. Thank you for smashing the like button. Welcome to all the new people who have popped on as well. Before we finish, we have our one for the road. Hope you enjoyed this before we go, and have a good evening or night.
Tory MP IT support, how can I help?
Hello, I've got a Tory MP on Sky News talking about transgender issues.
Oh dear me.
Yeah, he hasn't got a clue what's going on.
Right, leave it to me.
Thanks, bye.
Right, let's see who we've got.
Where she was saying that under her preferred interpretation of the law...
Who the flip's this?
Trans women...
Trans women? Oh my God, it gets worse.
If trans men then have to use women's toilets, that's going to make women less safe. Because how are you going to stop a man, a normal man, going into a woman's toilets and saying, I'm a trans man? And so I think we have to look at...
he doesn't understand. He's gone. Okay, I'm going to have to access him.
I don't follow that logic.
Why?
Accessing now.
We're saying that people who are biologically men shouldn't be using women's toilets. That's the point of this rule.
Yeah, he's completely misunderstood. I might have to do a reboot.
But a trans man is biologically a woman.
Someone who's transitioned from being a woman to a man.
He's absolutely gone. I'm going to have to reboot.
And so they would then have to use women's toilets.
Oh my God, he's frozen. Right. Shutting down. Rebooting.
I think this...
And that's the problem. That is the problem, and that's what concerns me.
What's he doing? What's going on? Oh my God, he's still a dial-up model. Hello, yeah, this is Tory MP IT support. Why have we still got dial-ups doing media rounds? I don't care if he's got a fresh AOL CD inside him, for flip's sake.
Yeah, let's go to the break now. Really interesting to get your views on this as well.
Oh my goodness, it's true. Guys, have a great week. I'll see you on Friday. Same bad time, same bad channel. Stay safe, take care, and good night.